Hi, OJ. I was born, lived, and have been married to a dead man in the land of the dead my whole life until recently. This is my story. I grew up in Ajah, Lagos. I grew up knowing just my father and my twin brother. We didn't go out of the house often as little children. We were always indoors. And our father didn't have a job but always had money. Whenever I wanted to go to the market, he would give us a gourd plant and tell us to squeeze it before leaving the house. However, I began suspecting things weren't right the day I left the house without the gourd plant. I opened the door to headstones and lots of bushes. That was when it occurred to me that I was living in a cemetery. Out of fear, I ran back inside the house, and my father yelled at me to never leave the house without a God plant. But this was only just the beginning. As a child, I only remember my father going out at night, but I didn't know where he went. One day, I begged to follow him, and when he agreed, we went out into the busy streets of Lagos. Somewhere along the way, we came across a food vendor whose pot of stew was boiling without fire. When I asked my father how that was possible, the lady slapped me. I thought my father would fight for me. Instead, he begged the woman to forgive me. I recall the woman saying, "Your daughter is not one of us. She will expose us one day." At this time, I still didn't understand what was happening. My father took me back and never went out with me at night again. But the day I understood everything was when my twin brother died. When I became of age, about 13 or so, my father brought a husband for me, and soon I got pregnant and had 3 kids for the man. But when my father wanted to bring a wife for my brother, he turned it down and said to him, "I will not marry your kind." I asked my brother what he meant by that, but he didn't give an explanation, citing that I am just a woman and I wouldn't understand. So one day, as we were eating, my brother coughed and choked, and then he died suddenly. Our father just stood there, watching him as his son died without helping him. When my brother died, he took his body out into the graveyard. It was at this point I knew something was wrong, but I needed to be convinced. It is at this point that I would ask that you subscribe to the channel, share a comment, or a post, because that is the only way you encourage me to bring you more stories and more confessions. Please subscribe. Let's go. I gathered up courage and asked him about his own people, about our mother, grandmother, grandfather, and other siblings he mentioned before. My father now told me that he was from Akure, and after so much pressure, he agreed to take me and my children to Akure. When we got to the compound, he just pointed at a house and said he was coming and that he wanted to go and see an old friend. When I went to the house, I introduced myself, but they told me the man I claimed to be my father had been dead a long time ago. They even pointed at his grave where he was buried. But I wasn't shocked. I always knew. I just needed to be convinced the more. I picked up my kids and headed back to Lagos, hoping my father would explain better in person. Unfortunately for me, I couldn't trace my way back home because I lost the God plant. My inability to find a God plant meant I could not trace my way back home in Ajah. I became stranded, but I remembered my husband's people lived in Osun State. So I found a way to take my kids to Osun State and eventually located my husband's people. When I got there, I introduced myself and my children as their son's wife and kids. But they also told me the same thing, that the man I was claiming to be my husband has been dead for years. My mother-in-law saw the resemblance of her son in my kid's face, and that was how she was convinced that the children are the kids of her dead son. She asked that we stay with them as we had nowhere else to go. I currently live with my ghost husband's parents and family in Osun State. For another interesting confession story, click on this video.